From the Heartland Business and Event Center, nestled in busy downtown Jesup, Iowa, home of Farmers Day.
Farmers Day's here. The whole streets are full of carnival things and expensive carnival things, and wonderful show. So
yeah. Alongside producer Blake Tempus down there and co-host Dale Rueber, I'm Jim Gillespie. This is the Jesup News for July 12th, 2026. Some advice before we start the show from the great Mark Twain: do not put off until tomorrow what can be put off till the day after tomorrow as well, Dale.
I live by that.
All right. Also, check out our friend Bubba Seaman as he does the podcast What Is Up. On that podcast, they talk about everything with everyone. Nothing is off the table. Our guest may know Bubba. If not, she needs to. Bubba would interview her as well. Bubba does a nice podcast
Does
discussing.
he quote Mark Twain, or
I doubt
I doubt it. There's very few people that do that like you do.
He's not as good looking as you are either.
Well,
Dale.
that's to be expected.
Yeah, discussing real life with real people. Bubba talks about the good and the bad, the highs and lows, and everything in between. It's interesting yet entertaining podcast with real people talking about what is up. Tonight we're fortunate. We have a lady originally from Fairbank, Iowa, and she now lives in the Twin Cities. She is a multi-book author, and her most recent book is Anatomy of Death. I've seen her speaking up at the coffee house in Fairbank, and of course I had to ask her to be on the podcast.
Well, sure.
And I beat Bubba to her. So she is. We were going to do it by the internet, and she said, "Well, I'd like to come down."
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll ask her how often she gets home. But welcome, Betty.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Wow, how wonderful to be here. The reason I insisted on driving down from the Twin Cities, in all honesty, is because of the camaraderie that doesn't happen as well through a Zoom call.
Oh, that's true, too. Yeah.
You're right.
I wanted to look you in the eyes and have you look me in the eyes, and we'll all have a good laugh.
Well, that's really nice. Yeah.
Along the way.
You come down 63 or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
It's
a little hard to get here today, though, with all the carnival set up in town. This is the biggest carnival I have seen in a small town in years.
Yeah, this is a very, very wonderful carnival. This is the kind you see at the state fair or at big fairs, and we're lucky to get them. And we have them this year and next year for sure. And we have a scheduling problem when the 4th of July falls wrong. But they've been coming here for many, many years, and it's a fantastic carnival.
Well, I had to miss Fairbank Days, I think, was last weekend.
Yeah.
And I had to miss that. Families seem to take precedence over scheduling. Mm-hmm. So when our Texas kids scheduled a vacation that same week, guess where I was? I was in Biloxi, Mississippi, and then Pensacola, Florida. So
your kids invite you to come on their vacation?
They do. Wow. Every year we do a road trip together.
My kids never do that.
Yeah, isn't that fun? Isn't that fabulous? Yeah, they must. They think we're getting old, and the will is on the horizon. So I think there's, I'm wise to their
That's
tricks.
one hold we have is we trying to rewrite the will.
Yep.
How many children do you have, Betty?
I have 2 children. One that lives in a son, Jeff, that lives in Dallas-Fort Worth, and a daughter that lives in Wisconsin, a little town in Wisconsin.
So the Texas ones, are they still normal people, or are they crazy?
They seem pretty normal to me.
They haven't lived in
but
Texas
I don't
very
know
long
if
then,
they think
so.
I'm from Minnesota, and Minnesota has a reputation too these days, especially these days, and so they still treat me the same. So I figure we're all still good.
All right, you must have brought them up right then. So
Betty, you've got to tell us about growing up. Tell us about growing up in Fairbank.
Well, it's a wonderful story that I usually start my author talks off with by telling them this story, that I was born in Westgate, Iowa, on the farm that used to be called the Round Barn Farm. And so some of you here at the table know about that location. It was demolished many years ago, and today is just a cornfield. Last time I drove by. And my family, I was child number 3 after the end of World War II. And we lived in the area because my grandparents, my mother's family lived in that area that's where she grew up. And so we stayed in that area until Grandpa and Grandma moved to Sumner. And then Mom and Dad must have felt free to leave the area, because we did. And we went to a farm west of Fairbank. And that's where we lived a few years, but Dad and Mom really weren't making it at farming. So when he got the opportunity to go look for a job at John Deere's and got hired, in a nanosecond, we left that farm and moved and bought a house and moved into Fairbank.
You're a city girl.
Yeah, a big city girl.
Yeah.
I was 9 years old, and within a day, a neighbor stopped by to welcome us to the community. And he said the strangest thing this 9-year-old girl had ever heard in her life. He said, by the way, and he said this in a whisper, the town has a gangster. I thought, whoa, what's a gangster? I knew about cops and robbers and cowboys and Indians, and I knew those kind of fights, but I did not know what a gangster was. So that 9-year-old girl, also, my brain had started telling me I was going to grow up to be an author. Have no idea where I got that idea. Mom and Dad didn't go to school past 8th grade. We had books in our house, but nobody pushed them down our throats and said, you'll be wonderful human beings if you read these books. They were there. We read them at our leisure where there was interest. I held on to this idea all these years of growing up one day to be an author. Lots of kids let those dreams migrate into something else, but nope, I held on to that dream. And but I couldn't find, and that gangster stuck with me too. I was mesmerized by the word gangster. When my mom sent me downtown to a store to purchase something at the grocery store or the hardware store or the lumber, she sent me a lot of times to a lot of places. It wasn't unusual that I would walk into one of those stores, and in the aisle there would be a couple of people congregated having a conversation, and sometimes I eavesdropped, and it sounded to me like they were telling stories about this gangster and what he was up to, which only added fuel to my idea for who and what this gangster was all about. I worked in high school at the town cafe, and I probably waited on him, but just never knew who he was. So couldn't find a time. I married, had children. All these years, I couldn't find time to write a book. So I had to wait until about 12 years ago when I retired. And then I planned to launch a whole new career as an author. And my first book was to research and find out if this guy who grew up living in my hometown, if he really was who he claimed he was. And I had learned by that time he claimed he was bookkeeper to Al Capone. There were lots of people who claimed to have carried his booze for him, delivered his booze, people who said I'd met over the years who claimed they were his bodyguard or drove his car. But here was a guy, curious enough, who said he was his bookkeeper. I thought there has to be a remnant of truth in that. So it turned out to be easier than I thought to find out if that was fact or fiction. One day I went on the internet and I typed in his name. His name was Louis LaCava. I typed in Louis LaCava and Al Capone, and up popped his testimony at Capone's 1931 trial on tax evasion, and he had testified as Al Capone's bookkeeper.
So was he hiding in Fairbank or what, Betty?
Well, I didn't know until I researched him, but apparently during the 1990s, lots of young people were fleeing from the farm to the big city where all the bright lights were and the magic was happening and all the dances and the drinking, and three sisters from the Independence area fled their family farm, ran away in the dark of night, and ended up in Chicago. One of them very quickly did not like the noise and the smell, and you could never sleep because it's too noisy, Chicago. And she went back home, but two of them ended up both married to gangsters. So they bring them home to meet family and friends, and they have family and friends in Fairbank. And so one of the sisters that marries the other gangster rents a home on the far east end of Main Street, and that's where Louis and his wife and his new bride live when they're in the area as well. So that's how small towns, as I understand it, how they end up with gangsters.
What were those sisters? What was those sisters' maiden names? What were their names? Necker from Independence.
Yes.
John, are you old enough to remember that family?
They're still Neckers.
Yeah, they are. I hear from them
Did
from
he
time to time.
live extravagantly? Was it a big house and he had big cars or anything like that? Or
He was most known for his big black Lincoln that he drove.
Okay.
Yes, and you know how farmers come to town? They don't come to town with their hair combed and their beards neatly trimmed and in their finest clothes. But no, when Louis was in town, he really stood out because, and I'm telling you this story as it was repeated to me, so because I interviewed about a dozen locals who knew him either as children or they told me the stories their parents told them about their run-ins with Louis LaCava. No, he was dressed head to foot like a gangster, a nice fedora on the top of his head, smoking a nice Cuban cigar, puffing away on it, a nice tailored suit and white shirt and spats on his feet. So he really stuck out. So for a while, they just referred to him as the mystery man.
so about what year was this?
When he came to town, the early 1920s.
1912. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
And his wife had gotten a job. I found in a Chicago newspaper that she had gotten a job working at a lunch counter, I believe it was. Yeah. So probably they had a run-in at a lunch counter, and that's how they met. I never did hear that story.
Yeah.
So, and several of the family have come to my book events, and I tried to elicit information from them, but many of them didn't know much more about Uncle Louis.
So did the couple have children?
No, they never did.
So there's no relatives left.
So they ended up staying in the area off and on for the next 60 years.
Oh, wow.
And they eventually built a home, a summer home in Fairbank and a winter home in Florida.
Okay.
So, and they're buried in the town cemetery in Fairbank.
So he must have got to keep some of the money.
Wouldn't you think?
You would think, yeah.
We don't know. We don't know what happened to his money.
So where's the home they built in Fairbank at?
Oh, you know, I try not to.
Oh.
I try to make that easy on the family and not tell that story.
They still live there? Okay.
Their family still living in the
okay.
house, yes.
That's fine then.
Yeah.
So.
How many of your books have Louis in your book?
Well, primarily the first book called Gangster in Our Midst, bookkeeper, lieutenant, and sometimes hitman for Al Capone, because he was all of those things for Al Capone.
And so you could use his real name in the book because that's historical,
Well, I got the information from public newspapers,
Yeah, okay.
so
you didn't have to do a lot of pseudonyms or anything.
Yeah, so I really tell the story of Louis LaCava in that book from newspaper articles, FBI reports, police reports, and from interviews from people who actually knew him.
How hard was it to get like FBI reports about it?
You know, lots of things are digital these days, so I could do a lot of it from my computer, especially old news stories.
Sure.
And I got a lot of news stories from newspapers.com.
So what do you think it takes you? How much research, as far as months, does it take you for each book, would you say, Betty?
Usually it takes me a year to a year and 3 months to thoroughly research and write the book. Yeah. So it's a long process to write. I write historical fiction, which is a combination of, it's built on a true story, and then there are things you just don't know, and you have to fill it in with fiction.
Sure.
So
Do you use you make an outline before you start, or do you just start and go?
I write a mission statement that's usually 2 or 3 sentences. And in this case, I wanted to tell the story of Louis LaCava and his involvement in the Al Capone organization and the effect it had on the community of Fairbank, having a gangster living there for 60 years.
Okay.
Because I'm in the Twin Cities these days. We're in the news a lot. Shootings happened again this weekend up there. It's pretty terrorizing to live on a street where you worry about the house 2 doors down, and it's maybe a drug house or maybe it's just a gang house, and you worry about bullets flying. that's who I dedicated this book to. People who have families and raise their children in communities that are communities where war is going on or a war of sorts is going on. And so I really got a sense of the people of Fairbank living in that community from the stories they told me and the fear that they felt, worrying that whenever Louis LaCava came to town, so many of them were worried who would follow him to town, because he was working for Al Capone, legitimately working for Al Capone. And he had done a lot of things that would raise the ire of people and would want to follow him and do him in. Yeah. And so that was the community he had, the terror that he kind of brought to the community.
You don't call the town Fairbank, though, in your book. You call it Oxbow. How'd you come up with that name?
My editor, I hired an editor from the Loft in Minneapolis, and she read my manuscript initially, and she said, if I were you, I'd change the name of the town. I said, well, why so? And she said, because the people of Fairbank, and so would I, probably will expect you to get every T crossed perfectly and every I dotted perfectly, leaving no room for mistakes. Yeah. And I know I'm not going to tell a truly non-crime story. I'm telling a historical fiction story. So it's built on a true story, but there's lots of pieces that are fictional, totally fictional. Sure. Yeah. And so she suggested I change the name. Ojibwe Indians, I was told, used to sometimes have camp up along the river there. And so I researched the name Ojibwe and found that Oxbow means a crook in the river. And there is a crook there in the river, so that's how I came up with the name Oxbow. I used an Indian name because those were the people who lived there first.
Right. So that was your first book. And that took you about 13 months to write.
Yes.
And you sent it to, who was your publisher again?
I'm self-publishing all of my books.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And who was your editor?
My editor. I actually use several editors, so I'm not going to use the name of one editor in particular.
Sure.
Yeah.
But people out of the St. Paul, Minneapolis area.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Major changes did they suggest, or was it pretty well ready to go?
Oh, no. You write a book, and it's your draft. And then be prepared to start again. Yeah. Because the first draft is just laying out what you think you want to tell, and it's not.
Did that hurt you when they came back with that? I mean, were you hurt emotionally, Betty, by that?
I've been writing my whole life. I just started writing books, but I've been writing my whole life. I retired from 3M Company and published lots of things and wrote lots of things for them. So no, I'm not. Honestly, you'd really like everything you write for people to say, oh my, that is the best thing I've ever read in my life. Yeah. But it just does. And that's not been my experience. So,
good for you.
Yeah.
Oh, Betty, we're going to take a break here, and we'll be back after a short break. So this is Steve Brown Art Center Podcast Network. All right, this is Steve Brown Art Center Podcast Network. We're back for the second half of our show. We're with Betty Brandt Passick, and she is talking about her 3 books. The second book, Betty, is The Black Bag of Dr.
Wiltsey.
Tell us about that a little bit.
So I knew the name Wiltsey from a newspaper article I came across when I was researching my first book. And the newspaper article that piqued my interest was that a father and son were physicians in the area. And I thought that was unique, although it's not really that unique, is it? It's still not unique that a son will decide to become physician like his father.
Sure.
But then I realized that they had been in my hometown. So then I looked into them further and found they had quite a story to tell. And it was also a time when the idea that we weren't going to be as welcoming to immigrants in America as America had once been. And the pandemic was happening. And so I was secluded in my home just researching this family. I found family members in Strawberry Point where they settled, and they encouraged me to write this story, and they said, we'll help you in any way we can. And because of the connection to the Wiltsey, the Wiltseys were in Fairbank, and I like to write books about that part of Northeast Iowa, I looked into it. And it turns out Dr. Alexander Wiltsey in the middle 1800s immigrated from Ontario, Canada, which was quite a trek to bring his family, his wife and 3 children. You can imagine the long trip. When they got to Illinois, they debarked the boats, and the rest of the way was by following Indian trails on a covered wagon. We all know the rest of that story. And finally, they end up in Northeast Iowa. And the reason they go to Northeast Iowa is because they already have family that settled in the territory of Iowa, because Iowa still isn't a state. And so this family stays in the Dyersville area for a while, and then they actually settle in Strawberry Point. So it became more of a Strawberry Point article or a story, but also very connected to Fairbank, because the physicians during that time in the 1800s, the physicians were graduating from the major colleges on the East Coast, and they were also following the trails inland into in the state of Iowa, and creating what they called medical societies. And so pioneer physicians were, if you wanted to join one of these medical societies, I fear I'm going to sneeze, you were coupled with a college-educated physician out east. Fairbank had Dr. Artell Ward in this town already, a college-graduated physician. And from what I could tell, he and Dr. Alexander Wiltsey were linked up. So Dr. Alexander Wiltsey ended up in Fairbank quite a bit, shadowing Dr. Artell Ward.
Okay.
And so that's how the two towns are linked in this story.
And so who was the main physician? Who was shadowing who?
Dr. Artell Ward in Fairbank is the college-educated physician.
Okay, and Dr. Wiltsey is not.
He is a pioneer physician who probably learned from watching other pioneer physicians.
Okay.
And that's how he learned his craft.
Okay.
But he didn't know the latest. And of course, at the same time, the medical societies are growing in the small communities in Iowa and across the Midwest. Certain protocols are established, and that's part of what he has to learn.
Betty, why do you think the doctors were coming west? Was it easier to set their shingle up? And not as easy out east? Why were the doctors coming this way?
I think they saw the need. The populace would get ill. Measles, all kinds of diseases, flus, choleras. Certainly they saw the need and knew that those people were going to need medical care. And so they felt a moral compass, perhaps, to go inland into the United States.
So tell us, what's the main crime in this book, Betty?
So because this takes place before my first book, which starts in 1928, actually. This book starts in the mid-1800s. So that was my question. So were there gangsters in the area that were really problematic? And what would you guess were the gangsters at that time?
The politicians.
I'm not talking those kinds of gangsters.
I'm guessing the guys that own the beer halls and stuff.
Is it land? There's all kinds of land fraud.
There's all kinds of land fraud, yes. And you strike gold on your land, you just put a death wish on you because somebody's going to come and try and steal that land. But the biggest gangsters, the most prevalent ones, were horse thieves.
Oh, okay.
Because many of the people who fought in the Mexican War were allowed to keep their horse, and they brought their horse north with them. Dr. Wiltsey's cousin who fought in that war had horses. And so horses were, most people came across the prairie pulled in an oxen-pulled cart. So horses were not readily available. So horses became the premier object of theft, and they were valued at about $50 a head. So that was a lot of money back then.
Sure.
So it's really a story about that's the gangsterism that Dr. Wiltsey is dealing with. But that's not all. There's professional jealousy, and within the first 40 pages, there's a murder of one physician who murders the other.
Oh, wow.
And it's professional jealousy. So all kinds of...
Yeah, in the Old West, horse slavery, that was punishable by hanging. Was that this case in Iowa, or?
There was a hanging.
Okay.
Yes. And I describe it with some... And you brought your family to watch it.
Yeah.
You brought your children to watch it.
Yeah.
How silly. I mean, how... But that was the Wild West. That was your entertainment, I guess.
There's a graphic scene in the second True Grit show with one of the Baldwin brothers.
No, Bridges.
Bridges. That's
yeah.
right. Yeah. I mean, there's a graphic scene in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of hanging. You're right. I've heard that horse thievery was pretty big in Iowa at that time.
So that's the main gangsterism that's happening throughout the book.
So would it be like organized theft? Or?
Sure,
okay.
Sure. And they would steal them, they would round them up and try to get them across the border into Wisconsin was what I read a lot of, that they would round them up, hide them in a grove of trees somewhere, and then when the moment was right, they would shuffle them off in the direction they wanted them to go.
Okay.
And it was how they made their living.
Yeah.
Again, we think of plowing the ground and planting the corn, but there's all this other stuff too in Iowa.
But people were trying to steal your land. Were trying, especially if you lived near a river.
Yeah, water was
crucial. We didn't have windmills yet. For inland farming, and so that book also won a book award, and it's another good historical read about the state of Iowa during that period of Iowa's heritage.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
So beside yourself, Betty, and I see you at a lot of different, libraries and places where you speak about it. How do you market your books?
I market them obviously through social media. I write a lot of press releases to newspapers and radio and television. I'm a fairly unknown author, even though I've been writing since 2012. I'm still an unknown author. Every month there are about 30,000 new books, and this is before AI started generating books. 30,000 new books on Amazon. So if you're an unknown author, guess where your book falls on the list if you're trying to market your book on Amazon. So I don't try to market my books on Amazon. They're on Amazon.
Yeah.
But I primarily reach out to people, to libraries in communities that are interested in the subject matter. So these books are all set in Northeast Iowa. I use real names in the books. If I found them in newspapers or they're already public names, I use them in the books. So there are recognizable names. I hear from people all the time about so-and-so was my maiden name was so-and-so, and they list a surname and they say, was this relative really in this story because they really lived in that area and they may be my relative.
Yeah.
So I market it to libraries and bookstore, all the usual places, bookstores. I'm going to be John Bushby at KFMG in Des Moines does a good job with interviewing me from time to time. He does a program called Culture Buzz.
Okay.
And I'm going to talk with him again on August 18th. about my newest book, Anatomy of a Death. And this book tells the story of, again, a Wiltsey family. I was attracted to this story because I saw in the Owine paper one day, crazy story of a physician, and again, his name was Wiltsey. He ends up giving up his practice in Fairbank and enters the Independence Hospital for the Insane. And I'm going, whoa, what happened to this man? So I end up telling the story of the state of Iowa after the Civil War, because the Civil War ends in 1964. They build the hotel in Fairbank. He and his wife build the hotel in Fairbank in 1973. And the railroad isn't even in the town yet. That doesn't come for another 5 years. And so what's happened to this physician that he ends up in the hospital for the insane and he never comes out? So again, the family encouraged me to write this story, signed off on all the information that the Independence Hospital for the Insane needed in order to give me his personal records.
Okay, I was going to ask you if that.
Yes, so it's told very factually. That piece of the story is factual. There are pieces that I've invented in the book.
Yeah.
So that's the gist of the story. It tells about the life of Dr. Wiltsey and as his life begins to.
Now, is this the original Dr. Wiltsey's son then?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yep. So it's another Dr. Wiltsey story. I tell the story of many, many other people in the Strawberry Point area and the Fairbank area and the Independence area in these books. But the focus of this story, again, is a Wiltsey family member.
And do you find these books, they overlap into other states? I mean, people, even if they don't know the towns, but the story is enough that the book does well in other states? Or?
Wisconsin and Minnesota and Iowa so far are my primary states where I find people resonate with these books.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in Mason City a couple weeks ago, and two people came in and were drawn to this book, The Black Bag of Dr. Wiltsey. And I said, why are you interested in that book? Because they're just staring. They can't take their eyes off of it. And they said, because we're both Wiltseys. And they live in Wisconsin.
Sure.
So books resonate with people for all different kinds of reasons.
We all know this are an even print for some reason.
I do.
Even in a crime book.
Actually, somebody sent me a book, took a snapshot of a book and had my name in it as somebody who showed up at a crime scene. So I guess our names can show up wherever we least expect
There's
them.
an author, and I'm not getting his name right now, but in the back he has his comments, and he has like you call it an auction, but for charity. Then he'll put your name on it, and he'll use your name for one of the characters in his book, which I think is kind of interesting.
That is cool. Yeah.
Yep.
And he uses it for charity. And so,
well, I've got to ask, as we got about 4 minutes left in this segment. How do you develop your characters? Like, how would I understand? Like, you've got some information on the doctor that was sent to Independence, but like some of the other characters, how do you develop them?
That's always a tricky thing to do because, first of all, I want to try to find as much research and information about them as possible, and then I want to stay true to that. I don't want to turn somebody who's been a loyal, good human being and served the community into something else. And that's who Dr. Wiltsey was. The article says that the people in Fairbank were just beside themselves. That's such an honorable man. This has happened to him.
yeah.
They're just beside themselves. So I try to tell that piece of the story honorably and correctly as well. You know that people who are addicted to alcohol and, as Dr. Wiltsey turned out to be, alcohol and opioids, you know that they also are liars and cheaters and all of those things. So somehow, tenderly, I try to deal with that as well. And what that does to a marriage.
Yeah.
What was the opioid of the late 1800s?
Laudanum.
That's it was. Yeah.
So they treated alcoholism and opiate addiction as a mental illness in those days, I believe, and locked people up.
And so the Independence Hospital for the Insane opened up, I believe it was in 1876.
And is that what it was called at that time?
Hospital for the Insane.
I never heard that. So.
And so So Dr. Wiltsey ends up going there permanently, at least until he's transferred to Canada in 1894. So he never, I mean, he tries to get well there and then go on with his life and blah, blah, blah. But the divorce happens and he's living with family. And you can just imagine, you know, people who've had addictions and have struggled with it. And you've seen those struggles. And so I tried to tell those struggles honestly and as honestly as I could. And then, but another important piece of the story is I always have to add a gangster. And so they run this hotel, and you know, it's after the Civil War. And after the Civil War, things don't just magically become fine.
Yeah.
We have gangsters running. We have, you know, the story of the Jesse James Younger gang and how they went as far north as into Northfield, Minnesota. And so you just know that hotels, especially like Hotel Wiltsey that stood on Main Street for 100 years in Fairbank, you know, and this was their major hotel, you know they had gangsters, outlaws stopping there. So I manufactured, by the time the story begins, Jesse James is already dead. He's killed by a member of his own gang. Frank James is the only one left. Everybody else is either dead or in prison. In the Stillwater, Minnesota prison, by the way. And so,
not a nice place.
So that's the story I tell, and it's a tantalizing story, if I do say so. It adds lots of it adds lots of dimension to the story, but it's totally fictionalized. I do not know that Frank James ever stayed there, but I do know that outlaws stayed there, and so I picked him as the one as a fictional character.
Wouldn't it be fun to find the registration book or whatever?
That would
or
be
to
incredible.
find their china with their Wiltsey insignia on it, or wouldn't it be just fine? But nobody seems to have any of that anymore.
You know, it is interesting, and this will lead us to the next book here after the break. But you know, from Chicago to Minneapolis was the main highway for the gangsters in the 1900s. You know, to get out of Chicago and go hide away was the main highway for that. So this is Steve Brown Arts Center Podcast Network. We'll be right back. It's Steve Brown Arts Center Podcast Network. We're back. We're here with Betty Brandt Passick. And Betty, does your second book then lead into your third book or not?
You know, all of the books are standalone books. Some of them have overlapping characters, but generally you should plan to read the book as a standalone book and be surprised if you know one of the characters from a previous book. And so The Black Bag of Dr. Wiltsey, and now I've written Anatomy of a Death, and it's a whole different book and it's a whole different era. It takes place in the years following the Civil War, and I don't know what people think happened after the Civil War, but things certainly did not return to normal. They were the landscape was full of outlaws and people who were out to seek retribution for damage that had been done to them and their family during the Civil War. And it's during that time that Dr. Edwin Wiltsey and Lucy Wiltsey end up building Hotel Wiltsey in Fairbank, Iowa. And again, the town is called Oxbow in the book. But, and so the question, we were just talking here amongst ourselves, and the question was, how did I come up with the photo of them on the cover? And the person that I secured for this book cover turned out to be from Dubai. And I gave him a general description because I only have one photo of the couple, and I didn't want to use that on the front page. On the cover of the book, and because the picture I have is a much later picture, and I wanted a picture of them as a couple as they may have appeared at the time the story begins. So she's in her early 30s, and he's just a couple of years older. He graduated from Fayette College, and then he went on to Bennett Medical College in Chicago. So he graduated, they got married, and they've now built this hotel in Fairbank, Iowa. Iowa. And the person that was doing the illustration for me for the cover, I gave him this description of what they should look like. She's managing their hotel, so she's in her early 30s, and I figured she's from all I read about her in newspapers, she was just a critical part of the community. And I believe she probably was into making sure she dressed the very best she could, a fashion icon, if you will, and that he also held an esteemed place in the community. And initially, the illustrator came back with an idea of a physician with wearing a white jacket and his heart monitor draped around his neck. And I said, no, that was not the way physicians looked during that era. And it's set in 1870, so they weren't wearing white jackets yet, and they certainly didn't carry their stethoscope around their neck. So we worked at it, and finally we got to a rendition that I could live with, and so that's the front cover of the book. But it tells the story of this this physician, Dr. Edwin Wiltsey, and they've been married 10 years, and his life is falling apart. I don't know how long you can hide alcohol and opioid addiction, but his life is falling apart. He can't do it any longer. About that time, he is struggling. There's a man found severely beaten at the railroad depot, and he becomes a prime suspect. There's also an outlaw who shows up at the hotel, Frank James, the brother of Jesse James, and he becomes a suspect because we know about from history what the James Younger gang is capable of doing. In one of their earliest adventures, they killed 180 men, women, and children. He's definitely a suspect. And so that's the embodiment of the story of a marriage that's falling apart. A physician, well thought of in the community, is struggling with things the community really doesn't understand, because back then you didn't understand alcohol and drug addiction and what all that the implications were. And he ends up putting himself in the Independence, Iowa Hospital for the Insane. And she has to figure out what to do about how to keep the hotel afloat, and how to deal with this gangster who has now decided that he's going to hang around, and he causes all kinds of mischief. And so that's what the book is about. And ultimately, the man who is beaten at the depot ends up dying. So now we have a murder that we're trying to solve. And so this is the complex story that I'm telling in this book.
And what did they have for law enforcement in Oxbow and Fairbank in those days?
They had a constable, and his primary job was being a farmer. So, and planting crops and bringing in the crops. Yeah. And that's what we had. So it's really not until several decades later that they hire Bill Hahn, was the first marshal, paid marshal in the town, and he is hired. And there are salesmen who had come to the hotel on a monthly basis decades earlier, and they all of a sudden show back up in Fairbank. They've been missing for a lot of years, and they all of a sudden show back up, and it's Lucy Wiltsey who sends the marshal to investigate these fellas and what their history is and why they just shown back up in town. And she has believed for a long time that they should have been suspects in the beating of this man at the depot decades earlier. And so a whole new investigation begins with new scientific possibilities. Now they can do fingerprinting. During World War I, they started fingerprinting all of the fellas who went into the war, so that if the worst happened to them, they could at least tell who they were.
Sure.
Yes, and notify the family of their that they were injured or that they were deceased. So there's all kinds of new possibilities then, and that's how the book reaches its conclusion in the end. So
maybe don't answer this, but the person who was killed, is there something about him that is important, or he's just something
He's an old wine man. Okay. I found an article about an old wine man who was beaten at the Fairbank Depot, beaten to within an inch of his life. And he eventually lost sight in both of his eyes and eventually dies. And so that's a true story. Buchanan County, cleans out their files periodically, so I don't really know what happened to him.
I just wondered if you built a little story around him as to why he was killed. Okay.
I did.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so did you use the real name of the man that was beat, or did you change his name?
I changed his name.
Okay.
I just made that decision.
Right.
And so I use Lucy and Edwin Wiltsey, their correct names. So that part of the story I tried to tell I do tell a factual story. And the family signed papers to get me their real records at the Independence Hospital for the Insane so that I could use those records and tell that story.
What do they look like? Is that like they have like a file, or do they have it on computer? How are those
I
records?
don't know. They sent them to me digitally, so I don't know what their file looks like.
okay.
But they had primarily intake information. Dr. Wiltsey submitted himself to the hospital for treatment for alcohol and opioid addiction, and he also had syphilis. So syphilis adds a whole nother can of worms to the problem.
That's what got Capone. So.
Well, and syphilis, and how all of these people treated Freud. I have a medical journal. I was going to bring that today. It's a medical journal about this thick from the 1800s. And Freud in there said the way to treat syphilis is with opioids. The way to treat alcohol addiction is with opioids. So I think Dr. Wiltsey never had a chance of getting well from this, because anything he was trying was met with, take this drug and it will help you.
Yeah.
It was a crazy time for medicine.
So was there a house of prostitution in Fairbank or if the wife, I'm assuming the wife did not have syphilis that we know of, right? Or
We don't know.
oh, okay. But I mean,
No,
she had to acquire that someplace, I guess.
Yeah. And so that's also problematic in their marriage is, where did you acquire syphilis? You would ask that of your spouse.
I think that'd be something
I think that's a legitimate question. So you have to read the book to figure that out.
I will, yes. Okay, now I got 3 books to read, so that's wonderful.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because of the important role of the fictional character I add in this book, Frank James, the Northfield Historical Society has a lot of information on the gang.
Yeah.
They have Jesse James days, the defeat of Jesse James days coming up. And I'm spending a good deal of my time this summer at their the defeat of Jesse James Days event in September, and then there are multiple other events that I'm going to be at this summer.
Yeah.
I've also been true to what they've written and researched about the Jesse James gang and the Younger brothers, and the story behind that gang is that Missouri was called Bloody Missouri for a reason. It's because they were between the South and the North, and a lot of fighting took place there. A lot of people's property was confiscated, burned, stolen, and the Jesse James family, they suffered enormous losses. The feds came in there and bombed their house, killed their mother, and blew off the arm of one of their younger siblings. So the family had a lot of vengeance. So they joined other guerrilla forces out of a sense of protection, I imagine, during the Civil War. And then after the war ended, it was about retribution. And they hit our institutions, banks, post offices, anywhere with money, the trains. The railroads. They finally left Missouri and went up into Iowa, then further into Iowa, then up into Northfield, Minnesota, where that was their last rendezvous.
There is a movie, if I recall, and I don't recall the movie's name, about those events where they kill his mother, and
there's over the years I've seen several It's the same story, but they just re-up it back in the 30s and 40s especially. They did
But I build it that Frank James, like lots of people of all stages in life, was very committed to his mother and was very forlorn when she was killed. So after his brother Jesse James is murdered by a member of his own gang, he decides to change his life, and he gets a lawful occupation first of selling shoes. And this is how fictionally I build into how he happens to be in Fairbank.
Yeah.
And he's there to sell shoes. And then he realizes that he hears bits and pieces of Dr. Wiltsey's problem. And what he hears is that this man has threatened to kill his beautiful wife. So again, it raises all of his defenses. Acts of retribution are there. This is a damn Yankee, and I'm going to set this right. And so this is the reason he sticks around and causes all kinds of havoc.
Okay, so we learned a little bit more.
So you learned a little bit more.
Yes,
yeah. So I think this is going to be a fun book to read this summer for anyone who wants a piece of Iowa history, because we're learning, the PBS thing is airing all the time about United States history right now. Well, this is another piece of Iowa history that you won't want to miss.
Well, Betty, tell our listeners your social media. Tell your listeners how they can get a hold of your books. Tell them the particulars like that, will you please?
I will. My books are available on Amazon and Goodreads and go to a library, go to anywhere you want to buy a book, and they can figure out how to get it for you. Okay. It's out there. It's available. And my website is www.bettybrandtpassick.com. You can contact me through the website, and I'll be glad to respond to you. My schedule of public appearances is posted there. I update it daily, generally, because I'm adding things all the time to this list. And I love to go out and meet with people and answer questions and hear your stories as well. I'm working on another book already, and I like to tell local stories, Northeast Iowa stories. There are not many authors who write books about Northeast Iowa, and we had a lot happening here. And so I would love to hear from anybody who has a story that they think is worthy of a book. And we can talk about that together and research that together.
We know a crazy podcaster that lives in Fairbank, and he has a friend that comes and visits him quite often. And to put the two together, there's a crime there, I'm sure.
All right.
That you could write about. So.
All right. Put us together.
Yeah. Bubba Seaman and Sputnik Gillespie.
James Lefty Gillespie or something.
There you go.
Machine Gun Gillespie. Even Gillespie even sounds like a Sicilian kind of thing. Huh?
Babyface.
Well, babyface Gillespie.
I love to take this book wherever I go. I'm going to BoucherCon International in Calgary, Canada this year in October. They'll put me on several panels, so I will bring these Northeast Iowa stories to Canada. Yeah. And everywhere I go, I'm telling these marvelous stories of the true stories and the fictional stories that I've added to them.
And you know lots of stories.
I know lots of stories.
From all your research about this area.
Yes. So,
okay,
what a pleasure it's been here today.
We're so glad you came.
I just love it. This has been great.
Betty, we'll wrap up our show. You've been so kind with your time here. We'll wrap up our show here and talk more offline if you've got a minute. We've got a few things here. Dale, do you have anything that you must get out about? Get out?
Well, this Farmers Day is over when you hear this, so hopefully you had a wonderful time there. And remember, Ragbry's coming through on the 23rd if you want to see some 10,000 people on bicycles.
There you go. All right.
Come on down.
Don't forget, Dale's one of Dale's family members is going to have art in the Jesup Public Library. Who is that artist, Dale?
You want to know his name?
Yes.
Really? Okay, no, it's Elliot Gray.
Elliot Gray.
He goes to high school at Huron High School in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
So that will be up after Farmers Day here. Don't forget the Steve Brown Arts Center is showing Jennifer Kemp's at M's Coffee Shop over in Independence. We are showing Nick Thomas art at Gedney's Bakery and Coffee House in Independence. The Wandering Table will be in an area near you very soon. Don't forget we have the 24-hour Mustang camera sponsored by Joe's Pizza in Independence and the Manchester Hawk camera in Manchester. Also, you can access art supplies at the Little Free Art House in Independence, just outside of the administrative building of the schools over there. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog, as Mark Twain would say.
Did he say that?
He said that as well.
Did I tell you about this friend of mine that's addicted? We talk about addiction.
Yes.
Yeah, he's addicted. He drinks brake fluid.
Really?
Yeah, but he says he can stop anytime he wants to. So, you see, so
We need to...
make sure you get that. Yeah.
All right. That's very good, Dale. If you'd like to donate to the Steve Brown Arts Center and have an idea for the event, go to the SteveBrownArtsCenter.org and follow the link. If you have news or would like to sponsor us, email us at jim@SteveBrownArtsCenter.org or call 319-290-0241 and leave a message. I'm Jim Gillespie with Dale Rueber and guest producer Blake Tempus. Typo there. I know, and I got to get that out of there. Thank you, Betty Brandt Passick, for being with us tonight.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. This has been fun.
Thanks as always to Kelly C. Haas and Heartland Business and Event Center for allowing us to use the podcast equipment and studio. Thanks to the audience for bringing these stray dogs into your life, and remember that each day is about little victories.
Yeah.